church? Say amen. Amen. It is a pleasure to be here today, and I am so pleased that this woman of God and the woman of the community has opened her heart and wants to share with us today. Our speaker is from Selma, Alabama. She is the mother of 2 beautiful daughters and the grandmother of 4. She came to San Francisco in 1968, and she stayed here in this community of OMI ever since. She's a civil rights activist. She retired 4 years ago from UC as a hemodialysis technician, and she's devoting the rest of her life to civil rights in any form here in America. She will be sharing today why I walked with the King. Please welcome with open arms, Rose Snell.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Why I walked with the King. We, the people of Selma, Alabama, were oppressed people. No civil rights. Everything was colored and white. White people drink from the fountain with the sign white only. The black people drink from the sign of the water fountain with colored only. We had a bus system in which both black and white would ride, but when with the whites in the front of the bus and the blacks in the back of the bus, but when the front section became full of white people, the blacks would have to give their seats up and stand up. The whites had many restrooms. The blacks had only one restroom in the H&S Crest store. The restaurants was whites in the front door and blacks in the back door, and all the time a black man was in the kitchen cooking all the food. Black schools and white schools. The school books that blacks would receive was books discarded from the white schools. Blacks did not have voting rights. Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot and killed because he was working to get people registered. We had regular Ku Klux Klan scares. When the Ku Klux Klan, dressed in white sheets, would ride through the black neighborhood, all the blacks had to be off the streets, hiding inside their houses and praying that your house did not have a cross burning on the front line. If you was one of the unfortunate ones to have a cross burned in front of your house, you would have to leave town now or face the consequences of being killed. We wanted the same opportunities to go to college with the white children. George Wallace, the governor of the state of Alabama, stood at the door of the college to stop the black kids from entering. These were a few of the conditions that made me want to stand up and march for our rights. Martin Luther King came to my hometown, and I remember Dr. King speaking at a mass meeting. Dr. King reminded us that we had rights, and we didn't have to continue to live like this. And I remember Dr. King saying something like this: if a man hasn't discovered something that he would die for, he isn't fit to live. And I remember feeling so encouraged. We had sitting demonstrations in restaurants. A group of us would go to a white restaurant, we'd take a seat, but we never got into service. We would be refused service and was told to go to the back door. But we told them we wanted to be served and refused to leave. And sometimes we were arrested. Most of the times we were just refused service. There were attempts made to vote, only to be thrown out. We refused to sit in the back of the bus, and the bus company went out of business. The next step was to march to the capital of Alabama and let it be known that we wanted our civil rights. The next thing I knew, I was in that line marching from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. The Selma to Montgomery march was a 50-mile march, The march was marked in history as Bloody Sunday. It was called Bloody Sunday because it was a lot of bloodshed that day. March 7, 1965, 600 of us protesters made our first attempt. We were met with lots of opposition. State troopers, local policemen on horses with billy clubs, tear gas, a lot of bloodshed, and a trip to jail. We were determined not to let nobody turn us around. We would join hands and sing songs like, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around." Another song we would sing is, "Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave, and go home to my Lord and be free." And the other song that became really one that everybody got to know was we would put our arms together like that and hold hands to the next person, and we would be moving from side to side. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. These songs would help us keep our spirits up as we endured whatever would come our way. The second march, a few days later, with King in the front line, 2,500 protesters marched across the bridge, but was ordered to turn around or be in contempt of court. We turned around this time without incident. That evening, 3 white ministers who had come to the march were attacked and beaten with clubs. The worst injured was James Reed, a white minister from Boston. Selma's public hospital refused to treat Reverend Reed. He had to be taken to Birmingham University Hospital, 2 hours away. Reed died on Thursday, March 11. The third march started on March 16. 8,000 protesters, with King in the front line, was protected by 2,000 soldiers of the U.S. Army, 1,900 members of the Alabama National Guard under the federal command of many FBI agents and federal marshals. We arrived at the state capitol of Montgomery on March 25th. By this time, our group had grown to 25,000 protesters. King delivered the speech on the steps of the state capitol. How long? Not long. The end we seek is a society at peace with itself, a society that can live with its conscience. I know you are asking today, how long will it take? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it would not be long. That night, on a makeshift stage, a Stars for Freedom rally was held, with singers Harry Belafonte, Tony Bennett, Frankie Lane, Peter Paul and Mary, Sammy Davis Jr., and Nina Simone, all performing. The only song I remember was Peter Paul and Mary singing, "This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island." Later that night, a white protester, Viola LaRusso, was shot and killed by the Ku Klux Klan. 5 months later, August 1965, a white voter rights activist, Jonathan Dennis, was shot and killed as he was trying to protect a 16-year-old black girl. As a result of our struggles for freedom, things did change. The Supreme Court ordered the South to allow blacks the same privileges as whites. We were allowed to go to the same places as whites. We gained our rights to vote. Before the Civil Rights Movement, Selma had 150 black registered voters. After the movement, 9 months later, a total of 7,000 registered voters. They were able to vote Chef Jim Clark out of office. Jim Clark was the one giving the orders for the treatments we received. The National Guards were ordered to remove George Wallace or anyone else who stood in the door of the college. Vivian Malone, James Hood were the first blacks to go to the white college. Today, we have our first black president, Barack Obama. Looking back on this now, I'm so glad I marched with the King. I know we made America a better place for all. The things my children and my grandchildren enjoy today is because I was able to stand up and fight for civil rights with Martin Luther King. King lives in my heart today and always.